Members' motion with no legislative effect. Dr. Junius HO will move a motion on revitalizing the Mandatory Provident Fund. 3 members will move amendments to the motion. This council will proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the amendments. Later, I will first call upon Dr. Junius HO to speak and move the motion. Then I will call upon Mr. Ka-piu, Mr. Chen Kim-po, and Dr. David Lam to speak in sequence, but they may not move the amendments at this stage. The joint debate now begins. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. I now call upon Dr. Junius HO to speak and move the motion. President, Hong Kong has a population of some 7.5 million, and the annual healthcare expenditure has reached $160 billion, or about $22,000 per person. This is equivalent to 5.7% of our GDP. For geriatrics, diabetes, cancers, and related diseases, the expenditure makes up about 35% or more than $60 billion. Despite the heavy demands for healthcare, for every 1,000 people in Hong Kong, we only have 2 doctors. Even though we passed the medical registration amendment bill to allow non-locally trained doctors to join our healthcare systems upon returning to Hong Kong, but since December last year, only 2 lists were created. So the efforts were insufficient. And that is why public healthcare institutions are under tremendous stress. For general outpatient services, you would have to visit far-flung areas. For those who require specialist services, very often the conditions of patients would deteriorate. So the situation is grave. In order to relieve the burden on public health care, we must do something to relieve the stress, and that is why I moved this motion. In 2018, the situation at LegCo was not in good shape, and the opposition members carried out a lot of damaging action, and I should be able to use my Mpf contributions to take out healthcare insurance. But back then, I would be attacked every single time, and my motions would be voted down. But amazingly, from the pro-establishment camp, there were 18 votes in favor. From the opposition, 12 votes in favor. I thought that it is only natural that the Patriots would be supportive. We are just talking about average balances of $200,000 in the account, but that can buy everyone better living quality and health. Well, the Jockey Club has encouraged us to gamble or buy Mark 6 tickets. But no one can escape sickness, and a dosage of cancer treatment would easily cost north of $100,000, and healthcare expenditure is now at $160 billion, so there is nothing they can do about the situation. So despite support from the central government, we must become self-reliant. Since December 2020 to the end of last year, the accumulated sum of MPF reached $218 billion. But for the first in the first 5 months of the year, there was a loss of $150 billion, and no one had any complaints. In 2018, I paid a $30,000 premium dollars to take out an insurance package worth $30 million. From the age of 50 to 65, if the annual withdrawal from the MPF accounts does not exceed, say, $10,000, then we can take out an insurance package worth $10 million to protect our health. Otherwise, the $200 or $300 account balance would be exhausted very soon with various treatments. But amazingly, some people did not agree. So I think these people were hypocritic, and I don't see their logic. What were these people who love Hong Kong and love the nation thinking? In the past, it was all about stance but not logic. So yesterday we talked about solar panels. I think that the point was to benefit the people. You should think for yourself what is the best instead of sticking to the party line. I saw allegiance to the basic law, and according to Article 152, we must manage our finances prudently, but with the surge in expenditure, how can the government shoulder public health expenditure of $18 or $20 billion per year? But that's why I suggest using my own money, and yet you said no to it. So this is a triple win solution for everyone, for the industries and the government. Why don't we get it done? Instead, you are saying that you do not want to create a president. So we are brave Chinese people. We should seek the best for ourselves. So what is wrong with being the first? So I call upon members to support my motion. I will claim a division. In a moment, I will address the amendments. Please move your motion. Dr. Ho, I move that the motion be passed.
And I propose the question that Dr. Junius HO's motion be passed. Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Thank you, Madam Deputy. The purpose of the MPF is to provide retirement protection for employees. We lack the first pillar as advocated by WHO, that is public Provident fund. So the MPF may be the only retirement protection our employees get. For 20 years, the scheme has been in place. How come people have criticized it? Because accrued benefits after contribution for a lifetime are not able to make ends meet after retirement. So employees do not have any retirement protection. The management fees and charges are high, and investment is also inflexible. The FTU has always proposed various improvement measures. Now, Dr. Junius HO talked about revitalization. We talk about enhancement. For instance, in our amendment, we say there should be full portability and lower administrative fees, etc. Mr. Johnny, the CE-Select, said that his administration will be result-oriented. Our proposal is to ensure that both the capital and a value of MPF benefits can be preserved. So with regard to the original motion by Dr. Junius HO and amendments by Mr. Chen Kim-po and Dr. Kennedy Wong and Dr. David Lee Lam to allow MPF benefits to be used for taking out medical insurance, we oppose that. Now, early withdrawal of benefits from the MPF benefits is actually a form of offsetting. And I think if we allow money to be taken out for other purposes, that will defeat the purpose of retirement protection. Now, usually elderly persons need to spend more on medical and other expenses, so we should allow the benefits to accrue and only be withdrawn after retirement. And we think we should formulate policies to allow employees aged 65 above to join an MPF scheme also at a lower cost. There are many MPF products available in the market, and employees are free to choose if MPF benefits can be used for medical insurance or expenses. Now, if there is no medical insurance from the employers, then the hard-earned savings and also benefits will gradually be eroded. For those with financial hardship, while we suggest that the government should make MPF contributions on their behalf, but we should not add a hold to their savings and allow benefits to be used for other purposes. So if we would like to take care of the medical needs of the elderly, we should use other measures, and we should have a comprehensive medical safety net for them. As for using the benefits for a first-time home purchase, and in fact, Mr. Paul Jie also made a similar proposal a while ago, and the response from the government was, as at end 2018, the average balance of employee was only 18,000. It was not really useful for buying properties. If it is used for down payment and in case of insolvency on the part of the employer, then the employee will be under a heavy loan. Now, if the money is used for mortgage repayment, now using a salary cap of 30,000 as an example, if no voluntary contributions is made, then another $3,000 will have to be made. That will not be sufficient for paying mortgage, and in the long run, it will only aggravate the elderly poverty issue. You may say that the MPF in Singapore can be used for many purposes, but do you know that the rate of contribution there is 37%, whereas in Hong Kong it's just 5%, and there is no guarantee on returns. So the urgent task is to improve our MPF system rather than allowing our benefits to be channeled to other users. On behalf of the FTU, I move this amendment, and we will oppose the original motion. Let me declare interest. I am a non-executive director of the MPFA. Thank you. Mr. Chen Kim-po. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank Mr. Dr. Junius HO for moving this motion to revitalize the MPF. I think he has got a well-intentioned criticism of the system and has also made some suggestions. In fact, I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about the MPF. People have the impression that the return of MPF assets is low. If you understand the real data, then you know that this is not really the truth. So my amendment is just to add to the original motion the net return of MPF. Now, because of the epidemic and also interest hikes in the U.S., now stock markets have been crashing, and our Hang Seng Index has fallen by 40% starting from last year. So those who hold stocks and shares, I'm sure you will suffer some losses. So it's wrong to just emphasize that MPF has suffered losses. Now, we have seen a record load in investment return, but for MPF, starting from now, and after deducting administrative costs, you have to understand that the net return has been 3.1% per capita, and this DIS. The annual return, rate of return is 5 to 9%, which has beat the inflation rate of 1.8% over the same period. So there is no need to have an inflation-linked fund, because when the economy improves, the return will probably return to a healthy normal. Now, in 2009, there was a growth of 36.6% and 12.4%, and then 12.2% in 2020, 11.7% in 2020. So for MPF investment, you should consider the long-term rate of return. And to see the whole picture, we must disregard the extreme times. Take 2020 example, the annualized return was 4.8%, DIS return 3.8%, all net of administrative costs. Equity fund also 5% In 2011, the stock market plummeted, and then for DIS, the return still maintained at 8.7%, and also equity fund 5%. So during ordinary times, MPF scheme would give us a rather handsome return, and all these figures are all net of administrative costs. So as at 2022, that is in end of May, although the stock market has plummeted, the DIS has still earned 34% of return cumulatively. So I believe they are still good investment choices. Now, there are people who made voluntary contributions to the MPF account in 2010. About 11% of the scheme members made voluntary contributions to their accounts. Some say that the exchange fund has done better in terms of return. In fact, the annualized returns net of charges are just the same. In 2021 and 2022, the exchange rate made 4.8%, and then for MPF, 4.3%. So the two cannot be compared, because the purpose of the exchange fund is to defend our Hong Kong dollar, and therefore investment tend to be conservative. An exchange fund is not responsible for administration, and if you take into account administrative costs, the return will be lower. Now, for the DIS fund, the return is just 0.7%, and then for the index fund, about 1%. The MPFA is now developing its eMPF platform, and so the fees and charges can be further reduced by 3%. To benefit the public, they must learn how to make wise investment. Some think that if they choose low return funds as savers, in fact, they will lose out to inflation. So if you still have many years before retirement, you must choose funds that have high returns. Thank you. Dr. David Lam. Thank you. Let me declare interest. I am a surgeon in private practice and also a member of the Chung Kwan O Governing Committee. I thank Dr. Junius HO for moving this motion to revitalize the MPF. MPF is an important source of financial support after retirement. Of course, savings, investment, and family support, and when necessary, the safety net from the government are also pillars for supporting our retirement. Given the importance of MPF, we must not take out or withdraw interest lightly. Now, you can only withdraw the money if you pass away before 60 or if you retire earlier than 65 at 60, or when you leave Hong Kong permanently, when the balance is less than $5,000, or you suffer from a terminal illness, or you are now incapacitated. So if you have a serious disease but not terminal, you have you are advised to use self-financed drugs on the drug formulary, and you cannot pass the means test to get support from the CCF or the Samaritan's Fund. There is nothing you can do. However, if you're allowed to use your money in your MPF account to buy drugs, you will have a better retirement. Now, using the benefits in the MPF for medical expenses should not be regarded as going against the design of MPF. You may say that I am defending my own profession. No, that's not true. I'm talking about patients of our public healthcare system. The benefits from MPF can be used for designated purpose, and it must not exceed a certain ratio of the benefits. Dr. Junius HO said that the benefits can be used for taking out medical insurance. I think it can only be used for taking out insurance under the standard voluntary medical insurance scheme. So the premium is about 1,800 to 2,800, and if you're over 80, about 4,500 to 7,000, and they account for about 5 to 20% of the MPF scheme members. Now, for the use of voluntary health insurance, I think that our public hospitals should put in place a second tier of public beds with higher privacy and charging a little bit more than the public beds, and patients should pay part of the cost with 50% subsidized by the hospital authority, so that the safety net beds with over 98% government subsidy should be reserved for people who cannot fend for themselves. I think benefits from our MPF can be used very strictly on certain medical expenses with a payment ratio set. I think that will ensure that our MPF system can really ensure a healthier and happier retirement. Thank you.
先係通過咗。
Mr. Dennis Leung. Well, last week we passed the bill to abolish the MPF offsetting arrangement. The arrangement has not come into effect, but members have already proposed to take money out of the piggy bank. That shows that this piggy bank is really appealing, and it has the the attention of everyone. Now, before we break the piggy bank and dip into savings, we must first consider why we are making savings every month, why we're putting 5% into this piggy bank. Let's look at the long title of the Mandatory Provident Fund Ordinance. The long title says that the MPF is to provide funds for retirement benefits. So it should be for retirement, it should not be for home patches or health care. It's really to offer retirement protection. Now, many have said that in other places, they have provident funds or two, and both the employees and employees could have to make contributions. But then, say in Singapore, they allow people to use the benefits to buy homes and so on. So the purpose of that, the provident fund in other places seems to meet all the demands and wishes of the members, but then the arrangement is not actually acceptable to everyone. For employees aged under 55, percentage of withdrawal is 20% for employees, 70% for employers. So altogether 37% of contributions, and then 23% are put into the general account, and 6% in special account, 8% in the healthcare account. So together in Hong Kong, but employees and employees only make contributions of 10%, so the MPF could not really afford any other to pay for any other items. And also, the World Bank has proposed a multi-pillar retirement protection system. Hong Kong doesn't have the first pillar, that is government-managed contribution system. We only have privately managed retirement protection scheme, and that's a second pillar. So that means the MPF has to serve the function of two pillars. And if we want to undermine the functions of the MPF further, there's no way this system could be sustainable unless we have a new retirement protection system to make up for the first pillar. Otherwise, for those who, groups who care about the workers, should not really try to put their hands into the MPF. Now, I think to revitalize MPF, the best way is to improve the rate of return. For example, in Singapore, the Provident Fund has a minimum guaranteed rate of return for general account that is 2%, for a special account, an healthcare account, or retirement account. If they meet the requirements, then there's a guarantee of 4% return. In Hong Kong, however, in 2021, there's minus 0.3%. In only 4 years, we see positive return. 14 years, we've seen positive returns, and 7 years, there's a negative return. And the net rate of return is just 4.3%. Yes, it's above the inflation rate, but it cannot really accumulate assets. Especially for employees, the MPF contribution is not much, so the return is drawn out, and it affects their retirement. So the government shouldn't just create a platform and leave it to the market as if gain or loss has nothing to do with the government. Rather, the government should actively change the market. It should bring in different types of MPF products. So for people of different ages and with different needs, they could seek a reasonable return. The FTU has always asked for inflation plus one guarantee scheme. So MPF could help bring in investment return, also serve a savings function. Now, since the government, there are various funds for, there is need for different funds for investment, and it's not difficult to introduce such a fund. It's just a matter of whether the government has the determination to do so. Now, we need to allow accounts spread all over the place to have full portability eventually. So I hope the government will proceed with this quickly. We want to enhance the MPF. It's not by breaking the piggy bank, but rather we want there to be more in the piggy bank, so the public could rely on it for their retirement protection. Thank you. Secretary for Financial Services in the Treasury. Madam Deputy, first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Junius HO for moving the motion, and Mr. Tang Ka-piu, Mr. Chang Kim-po, and Dr. David Lam for moving their amendments to afford the government the opportunity to hear the views of the 7th Legislative Council on revitalizing the mandatory Provident Fund MPF system. The MPF system was implemented in December 2000 as an initiative to provide long-term retirement protection to the public. I see it as a marathon run that goes on for some 30-40 years. The debate today is a timely opportunity for us to take a midpoint review after running for 21 years as we look to the future. MPF has all along been serving the function of the second pillar in the overall retirement protection system of Hong Kong. It mandates the working population to save up for retirement. It complements other retirement protection pillars such as social welfare and personal savings. The government and the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Authority, MPFA, have been working hard over the years to roll out various measures to enhance the retirement protection function of MPF. Some examples of the measures introduced over the years are the Employee Choice Arrangement ECA in 2012, the arrangement in 2015 to allow the early withdrawal of accrued benefits by scheme members in terminal illness or with total incapacity, the Default Investment Strategy DIS with fee caps in 2017, the inclusion of the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges in the list of approved stock exchanges of the MPFA in 2020 to facilitate MPF investment in A shares on the mainland, measures passed by this council early this month to facilitate MPF investment in mainland government bonds and preparation for the launch of the eMPF platform, etc. All these measures are centered around the interests of scheme members with a view to adding value to the MPF system through various means. MPF is a long-term savings scheme specifically for the purpose of retirement protection. There are therefore certain preservation requirements. If scheme members are allowed to withdraw part of the accrued benefits any time before reaching the retirement age or meeting certain statutory conditions, the discipline of making regular savings under MPF as well as the important rolling over effect for capital appreciation over several decades would be undermined. Therefore, any suggestions to improve or revitalize the MPF system must first have regard to the principle of protecting the effect of retirement protection under MPF. Otherwise, the policy intent of the MPF system could not be achieved. To realize fully its effect of retirement protection, MPF relies on long-term and regular contributions, compounding effect, and dollar cost averaging approach for investment to accrue retirement reserve for scheme members. The rate of return of investment of MPF funds is, of course, of importance. The recent investment performance of MPF is exactly one of the justifications in Dr. Junius HO's motion for relaxing the MPF withdrawal restrictions. MPF is a savings and investment scheme that spans over some 30 to 40 years. During the period, various economic cycles and fluctuations in the financial market will inevitably be encountered. While from time to time there are organizations in the community that conduct analysis on the short-term movements of MPF returns, it is of little significance. We could learn from some figures collected by the MPFA over a relatively long period that since the establishment of the MPF system, the net investment return of MPF is more than $26 billion, and the net annualized rate of return as at the end of March this year is 3.6%. The annualized change in the composite consumer price index during the same period is 1.8%. Since the introduction of DIS funds in April 2017, the Core Accumulation Fund CAF and the Age 65 Plus Fund have been performing well with an annualized rate of return of 7.2% and 3.2% respectively. In other words, the investment return of MPF does beat inflation by a large measure and can withstand the test of time. In recent months, there has been some volatility in the market. MPF cannot be spared, and short-term impact on MPF investments is inevitable. However, MPF is about long-term investment and not speculation. With the compounding effect and dollar cost averaging, the cost of buying fund units will be averaged out to lessen the impact of short-term market volatility on long-term investment return. In the past 21 years, MPF has recorded positive investment return in 14 years. In years where there was a negative return, the loss would invariably be recovered swiftly, and the return may even exceed the short-term drop. We should focus on the long-term investment return of MPF rather than the investment in performance of individual years or short-term market volatility. It is impossible to have total control of investment return, but the government and MPFA have been taking a multi-pronged approach, starting with the lowering of Mpf fees to achieve better value for money for wage earners' investments. The average fund expense ratio, FER, which reflects the fee levels of MPF, has come down from 2.1% in 2007 to the new low of 1.39% this March. The FER of more than half of the constituent funds is now no more than 1.3%. After MPF trustees and their schemes migrate to the eMPF platform, in an orderly manner, and the platform is currently under preparation. It is expected that scheme members will see the average administration fees of schemes drop by about 30%, and there will be corresponding adjustment of FER downward. The eMPF platform has entered the development stage. We aim to complete the development of the user-led eMPF platform by the end of this year. Trustees can then migrate to the platform in stages in around April 2023 after the testing and preparation of the platform are completed. The eMPF platform can become fully operational in 2025 after all trustees have migrated to the platform. We and the MPFA are sparing no effort in taking forward the MPF project in full steam. We hope to create room for early fee reduction for scheme members, as well as opportunities to roll out various new initiatives and provide the supporting measures for implementing the abolition of offsetting arrangements. This would pave the way for full MPF portability. The motion and amendments proposed by members focus on ways to further improve the retirement protection policy, enhance the MPF system, provide more MPF investment choices, and increase the net rate of MPF return. Dr. Junius HO and Dr. David Lam propose to use MPF for paying healthcare, insurance premium, medical expenses, or and so on. At the moment, MPF contributions by employers and employees are 5% each. The annual contribution cap is $36,000 for both employers and employees. If MPF is used for paying healthcare insurance premium or medical expenses, other than for the purpose of retirement savings, we would need to consider if the MPF assets of scheme members are enough to meet the various financial needs without increasing contribution and without offsetting retirement savings. President, I will first listen to members' views and will give an overall response to the motion, amendments, and other members' views in my closing reply. Thank you, President.
Ms. Doreen Kong. Madam Deputy, Hong Kong's MPF system was designed to achieve savings for retirees. It was an important part of our retirement protection system. In terms of the performance of the MPF regime and relevant measures, they were much discussed at recent days, both among the public and at LegCo. I support Dr. Junius HO's original motion and the motion as amended by Mr. Chen Kim-po. He urged the government to launch the eMPF platform as soon as possible, and that different measures should be taken out to enhance the flexibility of the MPF system. The discussions surrounding the MPF system in Hong Kong cover three main areas. MPF contributions are affected by market volatility, and it lacks resilience against market fluctuations. Since the system was introduced, well, it has been more than 20 years. We saw Brexit, the Sino-US trade war, the COVID-19 pandemic, etc. These affected the MPF returns. Meanwhile, Hong Kong did not legislate for the minimum return of MPF schemes, and the system also lacks flexibility. The system was designed to tackle population aging and to secure the retirement life of the people, but the threshold or requirements on age were inflexible, and something must be done about it. The MPF system only serves a single function, and it does not cover the unemployed and those who could not join the labor market. Withdrawals can only be made after the age of 65, and the MPF could not be used for purposes like housing or healthcare, and as such it does not foster a comprehensive protection system or complement other measures. Having looked at other countries or areas such as Singapore, it has a highly flexible Provident fund system, and it is an important social security measure. A member cited the differences between Hong Kong and Singapore, but indeed we still have something to learn from them. And it covers public housing, and it also covers the social security system of Singapore, and it takes care of different stages of life for the people. Their Provident system features 3 accounts. The general account contributions can be used to buy ancestral homes or to pay for children's education. The special account can be used for retirement savings. For the healthcare savings account, it is used to pay for healthcare costs. The central system adopted by Singapore can help lower costs, and the Singaporean government guarantees the annual interest of the savings account, and high yield bonds were issued, and that is why we could see that the system is resilient, and that way needy individuals can use the funds in the accounts when needed. A complete protection system should be sustainable and versatile, and it could help ensure fairness to our system. Hong Kong's Mpf system was merely the first step to social security or protection. If we fail to remove the barriers to the Mpf system, it will not be able to exercise its function. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. President, I thank Dr. Junius HO for proposing a motion on revitalizing the Mandatory Provident Fund. And many people might find this motion familiar. And in February 2019, Dr. Junius HO proposed a motion to revitalize the MPF. These motions were very similar, and the point was to allow the public to take out healthcare insurance policies with their MPF balances. However, on that occasion, the original motion and the amendments were not passed. Last week, LegCo passed the bill to abolish the MPF offsetting arrangement, and there were many criticisms on the high administrative fees charged by MPF trustees. From April last year to March this year, the return rates of MPF schemes were far from satisfactory, and the loss was $99.7 billion, which was the highest on record since the MPF system was introduced. The return rates last year was minus 8.6%, which was the 4th poorest year in terms of performance since the MPF system was set up. Last year, the global markets were weak, and it was inevitable that MPF did not fare well. Since the system was introduced in the year 2000, since then, the annual return was 3.6% on average, which was higher than the average inflation. And in terms of the fees charged, they include the management fees, administrative costs, and miscellaneous fees. Since the default investment strategy was introduced a few years ago, the public can choose core accumulation funds with lower administrative fees. And in March this year, in a paper submitted by the government, they admitted that the administrative fees were still high. For the eMPF platform, which could slash the fees by half, it would only come into operation in 2023. But it's better late than never. The MPF fees declined gradually from 2.1% in 2007 to 1.42 by 2021. If the administrative fees could be reduced by half by 2033, the MPF fees would decline to 1.1%. But could this actually be realized, we hope the government can get it done. The original motion mentioned the possibility of allowing the public to take out healthcare policies with their MPF balances. The MPF system was designed to achieve retirement savings for the people. So if the funds are put into a different use, by the time people retire, they will have less funds to deploy, and that would affect the retirement protection system. The contribution rates of the MPF in Hong Kong are far lower than the Provident funds in other areas. In Singapore, for employees before the age of 55, employees must make a contribution of 20% and employer 17% for a total of 37%, whereas in Hong Kong, the total contribution is only 10%. But if we raise the contribution ratio, well, we talked about the abolition of the MPF offsetting arrangement last week. It took 10 years for the abolition to materialize, so this is certainly not easy to forge a consensus. Dr. Chum and Kong, a TV drama from the mainland, recently talked about the ups and downs in the in our lives, and it inspired what I am going to say about this motion. Under the COVID-19 pandemic, the efforts from the government were lackluster, and the demand for private health care saw a surge. The world over is facing population aging. The median age would go from 45.5 in 2019 to 54 years old by 2029. For males, the life expectancy will increase to 84.4, for females 93.9. So people are living longer, but what about the level of protection? Members talked about the current MPF system, but we do have other retirement protection pillars, including reverse mortgage, etc. With an aging population, our future generation would have to provide for more retirees, and the MPF system was designed to achieve savings for retirees. A number of members, including Mr. Chen Kin-po, cited figures. I started making MPF contributions when I was 18 or 19. The accounts started with a few $100s, and in recent years, the balance is about $200,000. So I understand why many people criticize the system. For voluntary contributions, they made up 10% of the total, which is relatively low. So the MPF system has been underperforming, and people had doubts whether it could achieve savings. If we only require employees to make contributions and their balances have declined because of market fluctuations, this is certainly not satisfactory. That is why we had discussions on how we can refine the MPF system to ensure that it can achieve positive growth and it becomes sustainable. This would be essential. A number of members talked about cases or systems in Singapore and Malaysia. The Provident system of Singapore offers many investment choices. It was introduced in 1968. They allowed the monthly employee contributions to buy ancestral homes, and in 1998, the system was expanded. Apart from allowing the contributions to be used for buying housing, they started allowing voluntary contributions. So it provided an extra incentive for voluntary contributions. A study pointed out that the move could increase the ratio to 12%, 50% for males and females respectively. So citizens can buy healthcare insurance with their contributions. For Malaysia, as some members suggested, in terms of private projects or developments, well, the contributions could be used for education purposes, but the contribution ratios of these places do differ. Enhancing MPF is not about breaking the bank. We need to diversify the makeup of the MPF schemes, and purchasing, housing, or reverse mortgage are different forms of retirement protection as well. Thank you.
Mr. Charles Hsu Chung. Since the establishment of the MPF in 2000, there have been more criticisms and praises. No one would be against enhancing the system. But then the original motion and amendments of many members propose allowing scheme members to make early withdrawal of MPF benefits for buying healthcare insurance, paying medical expenses, or even for home purchase, and I don't agree. Because this will undermine the retirement protection function of MPF. Of course, many have criticized the investment performance of MPF. This is mentioned in Dr. Junius HO's motion. This year, the MPF recorded huge losses. I agree, unstable investment performance is a serious problem. If persistent losses in MPF accounts, of course, the employees' retirement plans will be affected. Investment return of the MPF is affected, of course, by the overall economy and the investment environment. It also has very much to do with the choices of scheme members. In reality, not many employees are in a position to choose whether high-risk or low-risk products are suitable for them. And they don't know how to read the past investment performance of MPF. If that's the case, how can we help employees to make rational and correct investment choices? I think the MPF should have guaranteed minimum rate of return. The government could be the trustee, and then they could provide funds with low administration fees and stable return. Then employees need not worry about the return of MPF, and then they need not worry that their retirement plans were affected because of global market volatility. Now, the MPF has accrued more than $1,000 billion in assets, so the government is in a position to require scheme trustees to substantially lower administration fees. The government should also have regard to investment return. It should be an indicator in putting in place a reward or punishment system. Now, for fund trustees that have poor performance persistently, they should be penalized, or they should even be removed from the list. Now, we want scheme trustees to have incentive to keep improving their investment portfolio instead of just sitting on the hands and collect administration fees. Some ask how come for the Singapore Provident Fund the benefits could be used for home purchase or paying medical expenses. Many members have explained that. I won't repeat those points. The contribution rate of in Singapore is 37%. In Hong Kong, the contribution rate is only 10%. Even we don't consider the offsetting arrangement or investment losses, the contribution is not enough to support us through retirement. So how can we allow early withdrawal for other purposes? medical expenses or home purchase should be dealt with through other policy tools. Some have asked, now I have become jobless for a long time, how come I can't withdraw from my MPF benefits to tie me over? Well, we've had many discussions on that. If there is unemployment, the government should set up an employment assistance system. We shouldn't dip into the MPF that's meant to offer retirement protection to the public. President, I agree we need to enhance the MPF system, but it must be for consolidating the function of MPF as long-term retirement protection. The government should take up more commitments and take the initiative to enhance the entire retirement protection system. Thank you. Mr. Chen Siu-Hong. Thank you, President. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Junius HO for moving this motion on revitalizing the Mandatory Provident Fund. This gives us the opportunity to give our views on the MPF system. As the name suggests, the MPF system has much room for improvement. MPF is one of the 4 pillars of retirement protection in Hong Kong. It's been in place for some 20 years. The offsetting arrangement has been a great controversy, but low return, high administration fees, and insufficient retirement protection have always been the criticisms made. So we need to enhance and revitalize the MPF in a timely manner. This is what the public demand, and it's also what the condition requires. Now, I know the government has done much to try to lower administration fees. But then I would say there are, intrinsic flaws in the MPF system from the very beginning. The MPF is supposed to help the public make savings for retirement protection, so it is about a retirement policy. But then with the design of the MPF on the very first day, the government passes on the contributions of employees to private fund managers. So the public have to pay high administration fees. There is no guarantee of return rate, and losses will have to be taken up by the employees. So this kind of system is really bothering the general public. I think the government has a duty to completely review the MPF system and revamp it, because the MPF is not meeting the retirement needs of the public. Only fund managers are guaranteed high fees. Now, I think it's a fact that there's a poor return rate of MPF, and in 2012, the annualized net return of MPF is minus 8.2%. And that's minus $97 billion. And also with the poor investment market now, the average loss, the loss per person now is $32,470 this year. Since the establishment of the MPF system, the annualized net return is 3.6%. It beats the inflation rate of 1.8% during the same period. But then for the general working population without high pay, MPF is the most important source of retirement protection. But then when they retire, they find that the benefits they get are a far cry from what would allow them to live a retirement life in dignity. And then we hope the eMPF platform will be introduced soon, and then with digitization, there could be lowering of costs and fees. Now, the public have a hard time buying a home, and there's a long waiting time for medical consultation in public hospitals. The pandemic has also dealt a severe blow to our economy, so many are not able to make ends meet. The government should adopt a new mindset in exploring, revitalizing, in exploring the flexible use of MPF, so the employees could dip into the MPF to tie them over this tough time. But some are of the views that this will undermine the retirement protection function of MPF. But then if people can't even make ends meet now, it doesn't matter if the government paints rosy picture about their retirement, it really means nothing. Now, MPF is about the retirement protection of the working population. We're talking about huge amounts. If we want to revamp the system, we have to proceed with great caution. The government needs to revitalize the MPF if it's to allow the use of MPF for certain uses such as medical expenses and so on. It should specify those uses, and there must be a proper explanation of the change too, so the public knows if what early withdrawal means to their retirement protection, so they could make the right choice. And we should also make reference to the practice in Singapore. That is how we could have central provident replacing mandatory provident fund, and then we could have a universal retirement protection. Finally, now we're in an era of good governance. There is rational discussion in this council. I hope the government will take a proactive approach in enhancing the MPF system through a multi-pronged approach, so it could be even more effective in providing retirement protection to the public. Thank you.
Mr. Martin Liao. President, our MPF system takes reference from the multi-pillar system advocated by the World Bank. MPF belongs to the second pillar in the form of mandatory contributions managed by the private sector. It complements other pillars to provide retirement protection for our people. There are about 4.5 million scheme members, and the value of the total assets stand at $1.121 trillion. As the monitoring body of MPF, the MPF authority should work with the government and, in the light of changes in society and aspirations of the public, continue to improve the MPF system. The MPFA has done a lot, such as semi-portability of benefits so that trustees and also scheme members have greater say, and also to address the problem of high administrative costs, and there is also the introduction of voluntary contributions, which is tax deductible. I am not against a discussion of measures to improve the MPF system, but we must first understand the policy objective of our MPF system, and that is to pool employer and employees' contributions together to provide basic retirement for employees. The regional motion suggests that benefits can be used to take out medical insurance. Well, this is worth exploring, but we have to take care of several concerns. First, employers and employees have to make 5% contribution at 5% of their monthly wages, capped at $1,500. Now, for taking out voluntary medical insurance, the yearly premium can be up to $3,000. For an upgraded version, the premium can be $6,000 to $7,000, and for even better protection, the premium may be $10,000 per year. For those who take out medical insurance from the MPF benefits, I think we're encouraging them to use their savings, and that will erode their benefits in their MPF accounts. So if we allow scheme members to take out medical insurance with their benefits, there must be more data and further study before we can make a decision. Otherwise, the reform will make it difficult for employees to decide and will also distort the original intention of MPF schemes. Some would like to compare our own system with that of Singapore. Some feel that the system of Singapore with different accounts so that members of the public can use the benefits to buy modular homes and to pay for children's education, even to take out insurance. In fact, employees there are required to contribute 20% of their wages to their account, and employers 17%. So the total contribution is $3,700. whereas in Hong Kong, the average contribution is only 10% of the employee's monthly wages. So the two systems are fundamentally different, and we cannot compare an apple with an orange. Now, if we want to follow the Singaporean model, we may want to change the multi-pillar model, and we may require employers and employees to invest in high-risk products. Looking around, there is no perfect retirement protection. The MPF system is one of the pillars of retirement protection. It should be continuously improved to address aspirations of the public. But every time we introduce a change, we must analyze the pros and cons and forge a consensus in society. Without these, I find it hard to support the motion and also the amendments. Thank you. Mr. Lam Chen Singh. Let me declare interest. I'm a non-executive member of the MPFA. I thank Mr. Junius HO for moving this motion to give us a rethink of the MPF system. The intention is to provide retirement protection through personal savings, and it is one of the 5 pillars advocated by the World Bank. Since it is an important retirement protection for employees, how come the image is so negative? Because of the high administrative fees and costs, and also as pointed out by Dr. Ho's original motion, loss in investment because of fluctuations in investment markets, such as the impact of the epidemic in the past 2 years and interest hikes in the U.S. Many MPF accounts have seen losses. Mr. Ka-piu made a number of amendments to improve the return of MPF and to lower the administrative costs. Again, I support the amendment. As regards the second part of the original motion, to allow scheme members to take out medical insurance with their benefits, I have reservations. More than a decade ago, there was already a consultation on whether there can be early withdrawal of benefits. There was discussions in society, and the conclusion was only when a scheme member was suffering from a terminal illness would early withdrawal be allowed. In 2018, there was also a study on allowing scheme members to take part of their benefits to use as down payment for buying a home. Back then, the average balance of an account was only $180,000, but now the balance may be over $200,000. But you have to pay so much in down payment, so this would not be enough. Now, for grassroots scheme members, their contributions are limited. So after 1 year, the accumulated benefits may only be over $10,000. If close to $1,000 is spent per year for medical insurance, then the accrued benefits at retirement would be very limited. Besides, we do not have a universal retirement protection system, so it's difficult for employees or for retirees to have a comfortable retirement. Besides, if we allow scheme members to use the accrued benefits to take out medical insurance or to buy properties, this goes against the original intent of having an MPF system as one of the pillars of retirement. Some may ask how come it works in Singapore, because in Singapore they have 3 different accounts, one for buying homes, a second for medical insurance, another for retirement protection. But in Singapore, employees and employers in total contribute 37% of the employee's wages to an account. Now, if you want to change our system, I maintain an open mind, but there must be due consultation in the community and a consensus. Lastly, we should continue to lower the administrative costs of MPF system. The eMPF platform should be launched as soon as possible because it's expected that the administrative costs can be lowered by 30%. And 20 years after the launch of the eMPF platform, savings can reach $30 to $40 billion. It's just an estimate. We may be able to save more. We will not just benefit trustees, we'll also benefit employees, which is the most important. And as for medical services, the government should continue to improve its voluntary health insurance scheme and to improve public health care services. Thank you. Mr. Yim Kong, thank you. Now, for the low-income earners in Hong Kong, the Mpf system is a very important retirement protection, and the use of benefits in Mpf should not contradict this principle. But because of the epidemic and inflation, members are being affected. And scheme members may not be properly protected by their benefits. On the medical and on the medical front, I think the original motion and the amendments are well-intentioned, and we can have further discussion of these proposals to see whether we can more flexibly implement the principle of being people-oriented in our administration. But if the rules are too lax, then there is no guarantee that scheme members may use the benefits for speculation. So we have to be very careful. I have 3 points for members to consider. First, using accrued benefits to take out medical insurance must be carefully studied to look at the feasibility. I agree with Mr. Martin Liao. We can consider introducing a medical insurance part in the Mpf scheme cost to be borne by both employers and employees. Take the mainland as example. Employers and employees shoulder 9% and 2% of medical insurance account respectively, and for retirement protection, 21% and 8% respectively. Now, if we allow Mpf benefits to be used for other purposes, then the remaining benefits may only support a retiree for only a few years. I think it will be difficult to allow employees to use the benefits to take out medical insurance. Most enterprises provide medical insurance for their employees. For SMEs, perhaps we can provide policy incentive to encourage employers to take out medical insurance for their employees. And secondly, the government should consider the needs of members of the public. For instance, for cancer patients, if a cancer patient is medically projected to live for no more than 1 year, then the benefits can be withdrawn so that people who urgently need it can use the money for medical treatment. And thirdly, I understand that the Mpf schemes are long-term saving schemes. We must preserve the accrued benefits as far as possible. But because of volatility in the financial market, many scheme members have suffered great losses. And some scheme members don't even know how their money is being invested. So the government must step up publicity and educate scheme members on the risks so that they can really preserve their capital and even make handsome returns. Furthermore, we should continue to improve our retirement protection system so our people can be well protected upon retirement. So we must continue to improve the administration of MPF schemes. Thank you.
主席，政府一直強調強
Ms. Starry Lee, the government has said that the MPF system is an important retirement protection pillar, but since the system was introduced, many employees were rather negative about the system. And some LegCo members, including Mr. Paul Chair, suggested abolishing the system altogether. As a long-standing legislator, I often hear about criticisms from residents or that some call for the early withdrawal of the benefits. I think these problems were long-standing, including high fees and low returns, and positive messages were not conveyed to the public. So public impression on MPF could not be changed as a result. With the geopolitical tensions, U.S. interest hikes, the Russia-Ukraine conflicts, etc., the discussions on the MPF once again came to the fore. The DAB does not support Dr. Junius HO's motion. The MPF is a key retirement protection pillar, and the contribution rates or ratios in Hong Kong are extremely low. So without further study or reform of the retirement protection system, if we allow MPF contributions to be spent on healthcare, insurance, and other purposes, would jeopardize its function as a retirement protection pillar. I understand the good intentions of Dr. Junius HO, but having considered the MPF as an important pillar for retirement protection, we do not support Dr. Junius HO's motion. We received views from the public and we carried out studies on the MPF system. MPF schemes held up fairly well over the years, especially the core accumulation fund. And Mr. Chen Kim-Paul shared some of the figures with us already. The MPF schemes authority never shared information on the performance of MPF schemes, and the MPFA carried out a series of measures to answer public calls, including the semi-portability arrangement, the introduction of core funds, etc. But the same old problems remain. The government has not been proactive enough in explaining their work. The same could be said for public bodies like the MPF authority. So in the new era, the government should be more proactive in disseminating positive messages. I think the public bodies must change their mindset. For a young person making $20,000 per month, 30 years later, the total contributions would exceed $720,000, and 5 years or 30 years later, it will grow to $1.34 million. But well, this is a straightforward concept, but not many people readily understood the concept. And that is why we must properly educate employees on this snowball effect. The returns achieved by MPF schemes depend while the information is compiled by another private organization instead of by the MPF authority, and it was very hard to understand. I could not find the information on the fund sheets of trustees. So why can't the MPF authority be more proactive in disclosing such information to the public? The MPFA can learn from the Consumer Council. It would be useful to report information regularly to the public. Mr. Benson Loh. President, I'd like to thank Dr. Junius HO for moving a motion on revitalizing the MPF. Perhaps we should try to understand what is meant by revitalizing something. If something no longer exercises its function, changes must be made. And through these changes, we can add value or benefits. That is why we hope the MPF could be revitalized instead of being conserved or be confined to history. Since it was introduced in the year 2000, the average rate of return is 3.6%, which exceeds the growth in CPI. But if you talk to the average employee or company executives, they would say that the MPF returns were average. Some people believe the MPF cannot exercise the function of retirement protection. According to an MPF market forecast 2020 to 24, it was a report from 2020 for a 20-year-old employee with about 1.7 thousand in contributions from employee and employer every month. Let's say the rate of return is about 4%. By the time the employee is 65 years old, he would receive $2.5 million. So in the context of Hong Kong's life expectancy, which is about 85 years old, in the 20 years of retirement life, they would receive $10,000 per month on average. For someone who owns a property or living in subsidized housing, $10,000 per month should be good enough. For those not eligible for subsidized housing or those who could not afford their own housing, $10,000 is not quite enough because they would have to pay for accommodation and live. And this is not what retirement protection should look like. Does the government understand what our young people are thinking? They might have been looking ahead to their retirement life. Many young people told us that, well, young people simply want to get married and have their own family. These are not young people who are looking to move out of Hong Kong. These are people who intend to stay in Hong Kong many years down the road. But if they fail to acquire housing, decades later, their MPF balances could not support their retirement life. The Central Provident Fund of Singapore was mentioned by many members. Perhaps it was something we could learn from. It was introduced in 1955, and at that time, the public was not satisfied with the low returns, and since the 1980s, they allowed the contributions to be used for housing acquisition, insurance, medical expenses, or children's education, and the funds could be used in a flexible manner. And some young people have the following proposal for the government. They want the government to amend the MPF ordinance so that MPF contributions could be used as collateral for housing mortgage, and a premium could be paid, much like subsidized housing. And for this to happen, what are the policies needed on the part of the government? Some people said that the contribution rates of the CPF are higher than Hong Kong's MPF system, and the discussion is a non-starter, but we still hope the government can give us useful suggestions. Many young people simply need funds to pay for the down payment. Mr. Robert Lee, first I declare that I am a practitioner in financial services. I agree with Dr. Junius HO's motion in that we must introduce more flexibility to the MPF system, and some of the funds could be spent to meet emergency medical needs, but I do have my reservations over parts of the motion. And I think we must consider the issue more carefully when it comes to using the MPF balances to take out medical insurance. But I do have suggestions on how we can improve the MPF system. We should introduce more investment choices, and we should have greater participation from the financial services sector, and we must increase the rates of return. And in terms of diversifying the investment options, we are happy to see an amendment to the ordinance recently so that MPF trustees can invest in bonds issued by banks on the mainland or the central government. This would diversify the MPF portfolios and offer more investment options. The number of available MPF funds and trustees are limited. In the United States, there is the individual retirement account, or IRA. It allows securities firms to invest in exchange-traded funds and other related products. The MPF system should encourage and allow more financial intermediaries to provide MPF services and products. The increased competition would increase service quality, and the prices would be more competitive. Meanwhile, it would aid the development of the sector, and with more options available, these financial intermediaries can provide wealth management services. The fees under MPF schemes should be lowered and the returns should be higher. The average administrative fee is 1.3%, since the fees are relatively high. Despite gradual lowering of the fees in recent years, compared with exchange traded funds, say in the US, the fees are rather high. For S&P 500, the fees or transaction fees are very low. As the eMPF platform commences operation in 2025, the administrative fees should be lowered considerably, and the fund expense ratio should continue to be lowered, and that would achieve greater investment returns for the MPF.
Mr. Tony Chair. The majority of members of the public, including myself, are not happy with the MPF system. We believe the fees are high, the transparency is low, and there is poor return. And then there's been severe losses in MPF investment in recent years. The G19 we have Mr. Chen Kim-po, who represents the insurance sector. He kept saying that we have misunderstanding about the MPF. He says that the return rate of MPF actually beats inflation. Only a handful of funds making losses, and for those with poor returns, because the scheme members don't know how to choose. But the thing is, many employees don't know how to choose the right product, and they won't spend time managing their account because they have paid many administration fees already to fund managers. If they don't manage their funds properly, shouldn't they be held responsible? Shouldn't they be make up for the losses? Now, in recent years, the government and the MPFA have launched a series of initiatives to lower the administration fees of MPF funds, and also to enhance transparency and offer more choices to the public, to employees. Now, in future, it will be even easier for employees to manage their MPF account and investment with the launch of the eMPF platform. But then the platform will only be available in 2025 at the earliest. That means it will be more than a quarter of a century starting from the establishment of the MPF system. Now, how many 25 years are there in someone's working life? Now, Dr. Junius HO proposes the administration to revitalize MPF, and early withdrawal of MPF benefits should be allowed for the taking out of healthcare insurance to enhance health protection. And also, it will help to take pressure off the public healthcare system. While it's well intended, and it's true there are plenty of problems in the public healthcare system, such as the imbalance between the public and private sector. So there's a long waiting time for public healthcare services. And but then if we allow the public to take out healthcare insurance using MPF benefits, would there be an effective way to address the issue? With any cases of imbalance of supply and need, the most effective solution is to provide more supply. For example, we should train local talents, bring in talents from outside Hong Kong, and attract Hong Kong talents come back to Hong Kong. And then we should, give more play to the private sector. And then there has to be better primary health care, so these people's health won't deteriorate when they have a disease. And then we should encourage a healthy diet, an active life, and so on. Now, before, even if it's feasible to use MPF to take out health care insurance, it would not addressing the problem at its root. Now, home expenses account again for another major portion of spending. Now, some have suggested allowing people to use MPF for home purchase. It was suggested before. I was against the idea because this still would not address the imbalance of supply and demand, and there is serious imbalance in supply and demand in the housing market. And also healthcare insurance doesn't cover spending on home places, for instance. If the MPF benefits can be used for any purpose, and very soon the account balance will be depleted. By the time someone retires, he or she still has to rely on the children to support them. And that means it will go against the original intention of the MPF system. That's why I will not support the motion, so I speak. Ms. Connie Lam. Thank you, President. MPF, well, when we mentioned that, I'm sure many employees will, will be unhappy to hear that now Mr. John Zhang once suggested injecting $6,000 into MPF fund, and at the end everyone attacked the idea, so it was not proceeded with. So we could see MPF is really unpopular among the public. Now, MPF has been around for over 20 years. It's definitely time to revitalize it. I'd like to point out the 5 deficiencies of the system. First, high administration fees, we all know about that, and so that's actually eating into the the hard-earned benefits of the employees. But then for fund managers, they will charge an administration fee whether they make a loss or not. So far, there are over $1,000 billion of MPF assets with such a huge scale. Still, fund managers are charging high fees is unreasonable. Second, there is no guarantee of return. Say from January to May this year, on average, everyone is losing $26,000 on MPF investment. There's huge fluctuations in MPF return. Now, of course, after certain legislative amendments, there are now preservation funds, but still there is no guarantee the public may still lose out a huge portion of their benefits. And the third deficiency of the MTS is the rigidity of the system. Now, people may have different needs during the course of their life. For example, if they contract a terminal illness, they may want to withdraw the MPF early, but now it's only when someone is in terminal illness or with total incapacity. Otherwise, it's not possible to have early withdrawal of MPF benefits. The fourth deficiency is insufficient retirement protection. Now, there will no longer be offsetting arrangement, but still people cannot rely on MPF alone for retirement protection. In September 2000, there's an announcement of accrued benefits. 90,000 employees kept contributing to fund, but then they've only accrued about $420,000. So when they retire, they will only get about $3,500 a month, and that will only last 10 years. So retirement protection is severely insufficient. The fifth deficiency is that it's hard to manage accounts. Now, many are contributing to the MPF every month, but they still do not fully understand the system. There are now over 400 funds that they could choose from. It's very difficult for the public to compare the different funds and see which is good. And also, the trustees may issue annual reports, but then there's no mention of the actual fees charged and the detailed return rate. And then each employee on average has to manage 2 to 3 accounts. That's why, it is really a headache for employees. Now, I've talked about the deficiencies of the MPF system, but then improvements have been made in recent years. For example, the abolition of offsetting arrangement, introduction of the ECA, and also the default investment strategy, and the plans to put in place the eMPF platforms and so on. But still, these measures are far from enough. The government needs to keep improving and reforming the MPF system. For example, in other places, they set the cap on administration fees charged. Australia is 4.4%, South Korea 0.5%. So the government could reverse to such practice and set a cap on administration fees. There are actually such precedents. That is the default enforcement strategy. So we know it's possible to cap the fees charged. And then the government keeps issuing green bonds, government bonds, and I bonds, and there's some overwhelming response. So the government could refer to the practice and introduce inflation-linked or other funds. So for employees who want a stable return, they will have more choices. Now, at different stages of our life, we may have different financial needs. Expanding the scope of the use of the MPF benefits should certainly be explored. There should be a mechanism. So MPF could be used to take out healthcare insurance for first-time home purchase and paying for medical expenses and so on. The government has put too much emphasis on the big market and small government. So for MPF, that's a matter of life and death for employees. They just leave it to the market, and that's why we see the drawbacks now. It's not too late, though, to make amends. The government should reform the MPF system as soon as possible, and there should be more supervision and to make sure that the employees will still enjoy the benefits that are due. Mr. MNU. The DB is always stressed that after the abolition of the offsetting arrangement or the passing of the legislation, that's not the end of the matter, but rather it's just turning a new page for the retirement protection system in Hong Kong. So we could embark on another reform. So I'm grateful to Dr. Junius HO for moving this motion, so we could talk about MPF here and the government could hear our views, and then they could review the long-standing problems and defects of the system. Now, with good governance, then hopefully the public will have a stronger sense of satisfaction when they retire. Now, the original intention of the MPF system is to encourage the public to save for retirement, and so they could get certain protection. So when it comes to the scope of use of MPF benefits for healthcare, insurance, or home purchase or whatever, I think the first thing to consider is how these proposals are related to retirement protection. Now, these other uses are not meant for retirement protection. If we allow the public to use the MPF for other purposes, it might undermine the function of retirement protection of MPF. So DAB has reservation. But then our public healthcare system is always overburdened. If we encourage the public to take out healthcare insurance and lessen the burden on the public healthcare system, we won't be against that. It's a matter of how we do it. Do we instead of using MPF, we should expand the scope of healthcare vouchers. There could be children's healthcare voucher, family healthcare voucher, for instance. Now, and to many in the community, their biggest concern is about housing, especially when people retire. Either they need to rent a place or they need to own a property. So if MPF could be used for home purchase, it will help them to pay up their mortgage and plan better for retirement. That's why I hope the government will consider allowing the public to withdraw part of the MPF benefits for first-time home purchase, because it will really help the younger generation to buy their own homes earlier. Finally, I want to talk about the position of MPF in the whole retirement protection system. The MPF actually lives by the principle of the user pays. That means people have to manage their own contributions, their own income and assets, and then they have to make suitable plans for their own retirement. With accumulation of MPF benefits, many in the working population will end up with some assets, but then there is a high possibility that with such assets, people will no longer be eligible for old age allowance, so it undermines the protection. Some in the community are of the view the government should remove MPF benefits from the calculation of assets. Now, the government keeps encouraging the public to turn MPF into annuities, but actually income from the annuities plan could also render the elderly ineligible for old age allowance. Such deliberate arrangement on the part of the government will actually transfer the duties of the government from the government to the members of the public, especially for those in the grassroots sector. If they don't get the calculation right, there's a strong possibility that their retirement protection will be undermined. So I think the government needs to actively consider the position of MPF in the overall retirement protection system. In terms of MPF annuities and old age allowance, the government needs to explore the relationship among the three items. We need to revitalize MPF, and more importantly, we need to strengthen the retirement protection system. Thank you.
Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I speak to support Mr. Tang Ka-piu's amendment. Any suggestion to withdraw benefits from MPF schemes earlier than planned for other purposes will be opposed by us. Of course, the performance of MPF has aroused public concern because of the losses incurred. But as mentioned by members, if we consider the inception date of 2000, in fact, there has been a growth. We cannot just single out this year's performance and say that the MPF system is no good. In fact, even though there is a lot of room for improvement for the MPF system, it is still the most important and concrete pillar of the multi-pillar retirement protection framework. So we should not abolish it, rather we should improve it. Last week, we passed a bill to abolish the offsetting arrangement. It is a move to improve the MPF system. The FTU plans to lower the fees charged by sponsors and to lower the costs of MPF and to set up a public investment fund with a guaranteed rate of return linked to inflation rates. Now, I think we should continue to press ahead with these proposals. What will be the consequence of abolishing the MPF system? Now, if we don't look at the whole picture, then it's useless to just improve a single policy, because the MPF system is an important solution to our aging population. If we allow early withdrawal of benefits, then the other pillars will not be reliable and only Pillar 0 will be left. And as we all know, Pillar 0 would involve huge public expenditure and the whole society will be asked to foot the bill, and this is not really a solution at all. Recently, there was a survey done by the media about taking care of or supporting elderly parents. Half of the respondents said that their parents retired too early, and 60% felt that supporting their parents financially would lower their quality of living and would eat into their ability to raise their children. Now, this is exactly what the Chinese saying goes, you take care of your children, and in return your children will take care of their own children. In the Chinese culture, it is filial piety for adult children to financially support their parents. But then we have a low birth rate and also an aging population. This has increased the burden on the working generation. We can't say that these children are not caring, because in a city where the cost of living is high, supporting our parents financially is very costly. We cannot really compare our situation to that of Singapore because of the huge difference in the contribution rates. And then in Singapore, they have modular houses and property prices are hence under control, whereas in Hong Kong, property prices are sky high. So if we can use MPF benefits to for mortgage repayment, then this is just like elderly parents who use their retirement savings to support their children. In return, they're not being financially supported by their adult children. Thank you. Mrs. Regina Ip. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I also thank Dr. Junius HO for moving this motion so that once again we can have a chance to debate on the pros and cons of the MPF system. I think all of the amendments are well intentioned, but I'm afraid they are not feasible because, as said, the long title in the MPF ordinance is for retirement protection. It's not like the Provident Fund in Singapore, where the benefits can be used for medical expenses and for buying properties. So I'm afraid that many of the amendments for revitalizing the fund cannot be feasible. Before the handover, the MPF system was a very controversial proposal. Back then, we were given two choices by the colonial government, whether we should have an MPF or a central provident fund like that of Singapore. Now, if we have Central Provident Fund, it will be managed by the government. Perhaps it's because the British colonial government would rather have a small government and a big market. It did not want to bear the risk of holding huge savings from members of the public, or did not want the money to be transferred to the Beijing government. The then government went for the MPF, and there was a lot of very complicated schemes. The then government's intention was to stimulate or to facilitate the growth of the financial services sector. Fund managers are managing huge assets from MPF schemes, and as we all know, the development of the financial services sector is partly due to the MPF system. Now, under the scheme, there can be two types of schemes, so either defined contribution or defined benefits. In Hong Kong, we have gone for the former, and that is 5% of the employees' wages from employers and employees respectively. Now, for the latter, regardless of the investment performance, you will get a defined amount of benefits among retirement. But then this is hard to realize, because when there is volatilities in the financial market, it's hard to have defined benefits. So the British government has accepted the defined contributions model. I think one of the problems of the MPF system is too little too late. It was established at too late a stage, and the amount of contribution was too low. Now in Singapore, for those who are age 55 years old, the total contributions from an employer and employee add up to 37%, whereas in Hong Kong, employees are more accustomed to deploying their own earnings. They can decide on how much to save. Well, even for this contribution level of 5%, it was highly controversial. My former colleague, Mr. Lam Woon Kwong, took pains to lobby both the employers and employee sectors to approve the scheme. So although the amendments are well-intentioned, they are hard to implement. In 2019 October, the average benefits of an employee was only 217,000. It's just a small amount, and because of huge volatilities in the financial market, the balance could be lower or higher. And how much can you really take out for children's education, to buy your home, or to take out medical insurance? While the situation is not perfect, the room for improvement right now is limited. Mr. Ka-piu. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank Dr. Junius HO for proposing this motion to revitalize the MPF. I think Dr. Ho's idea is that the investment return of MPF is far from desirable, and I think many members of the public share the same view. And secondly, he is of the view that medical protection for the community is limited, and perhaps taking out private medical insurance will guarantee a better retirement, and therefore he has moved this motion to revitalize the MPF. If not for the abolition of the offsetting arrangement last week, I could have given more thoughts to this motion. But with the abolition bill passed, I think there are difficulties. I quote an example last week. assuming we have employees A and B each earning $22,200. Now, after serving 20 years, they will each have $270,000 in their MPF account as balance. If A continue to work for the same company until 65 years old, and he should have a balance of $607,500. So B, after serving for 20 years, has accumulated $270,000. If he is sacked, then the amount is sacked, but he gets $390,000 in severance pay. Now, 1 month afterwards, if he has got another job and then he retired around the same age, then he will still have $600,000. So what is the difference between the two? Why are people crying out for help? They say that they have lost their benefits through the offsetting arrangement. Yes, the money is lost, but to the pockets of members of the public. Employment B, well, he has $390,000 in cash, more than A, and the rest will still be in his MPF account. Should we allow an employee to choose how to use that $390,000 for taking out medical insurance, for buying his own home? Now, our voting results last week said that we disagreed because we wanted employees to have more retirement protection so that they could only withdraw that money when they retired at 65 years old. In fact, I agree that employees should get more when they retire. But then the government is not willing to lower that $390,000, and because of the current economic environment, I disagree. Last week, we voted indicating our wish that employees should get more when they retire at 65 years old. And for this week's motion, we are allowing them to withdraw their benefits earlier, and so that they get less when they retire. So this is a bit awkward. And I tend to agree with Mr. Ka-piu with the exception of the first two points in his amendment. Now, he proposes a guaranteed rate of return. Of course, that sounds good. But is that feasible? When the economy is so volatile, as mentioned by Mrs. Regina Ip, who can give you that guarantee? Will it be the government's underwriting this guaranteed rate of return as a result? And so there are so many uncertainties. Decades back, the interest rate of banks were high, but then a few years ago, interest rate was close to zero or even negative. So will we really agree to such an arrangement? So a guaranteed rate of return sounds good, but it would be difficult if we ask the government to be the underwriter. So I cannot support this amendment. Turning back to Dr. Ho's original motion, well, it is well-intentioned. He hopes to help the community. Well, I will work with you in heart, but I cannot support you. Thank you.
Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. Madam Deputy, I'd like to speak on Dr. Junius Ho's motion on revitalizing the MPF. First, I'd like to offer my views on the MPF system. MPF is a mandatory long-term savings system to allow working persons to prepare for their future retirement. For years, the government has taken out enhancements, but the high fees and low returns were still much criticized. Many people could not save enough for retirement, and I believe the government should play a more proactive role in management. To learn from the Singaporean government, an investment company was set up to take charge of the investment and operation or management, and they also establish minimum rates of return, etc. when public finances were in a healthy position, capital injections were made to improve the retirement lives of many people. Now back to the motion today. The revitalization motion is not a reform on the retirement protection pillar, but instead the MPF contributions can be spent for other purposes. There were calls from the society for the contributions to be used on children's education, healthcare, etc. And an undeniable fact is that some scheme members identify shortcomings to the current system. They could not deploy their hard-earned money, and they have very little choices over what they can do. So long as scheme members choose the right funds, they can enjoy healthy returns. But that's the exact problem with the system. The system was implemented by the government, but the individuals would have to take responsibility. Members can make their own choices, and for people with little knowledge of management or of investment, they were forced to invest the funds. Most people in Hong Kong lack the time and expertise in managing these funds, so they tend to be conservative. According to the MPFA, in the year 2020, for conservative funds, after deducting fees, the annualized rate of return was only 0.7%. Employees and employers' contributions are being invested every month, but the returns were lackluster, which was disappointing. Their funds or assets have been eroded by the effects of inflation, and the funds could have been used for better purposes. In terms of allowing MPF contributions to be used to take out medical insurance or pay for special medical treatment costs, I think this is something we must deliberate upon. Currently, the waiting time for public healthcare is getting longer and longer. For private healthcare, resources are available, but fees are relatively high. And low-income individuals have no choice but to wait endlessly for public healthcare services. For employees who have to go to work despite being ill, productivity would be affected, and if their conditions worsen as a result of the wait, the healthcare expenditure in the future would go up, and this would lead to further social costs. I think using MPF to take out medical insurance would not jeopardize the purpose of the MPF as retirement protection pillar. And many MPF schemes suffer losses after taking inflation into account. So using MPF to take out medical insurance might be an answer. There were criticisms of high administrative fees with the MPF schemes, and the returns were low. Allowing the use of MPF to take out medical insurance might increase risks. In 2019, the voluntary health insurance scheme was introduced by the Food and Health Bureau. New products were rolled out which could tackle some of the problems and offer more options, but there is still a lot of room for improvement. For instance, whether a high-risk fund pool could be set up, I think we should explore the proposal under the original motion. Thank you. Dr. Loh Wai Kwok. Madam Deputy, first I'd like to thank Dr. Junius HO for moving his original motion on revitalizing the MPF to allow scheme members to flexibly deploy their MPF contributions, and there's certainly a well-intentioned. The MPF system was introduced in the year 2000. The idea was to make personal savings through contributions from employees and employers, and to receive returns derived from investment. The consensus at that time was to roll out a central provident fund, but the government instead decided to implement the mandatory provident fund. The offsetting arrangement persisted and allowed employers to use their contributions to offset severance pay and long service payment in order to secure support from the business sector, and the Central Provident Fund proposal was shelved. Last week, the Employment and Retirement Schemes Legislation Offsetting Arrangement Amendment Bill 2022 was discussed last week, and there were great complaints from the business sector because abolition of the offsetting arrangement went against the government's promise to the business sector at that time, and the arrangement could not alleviate concerns from the business sector. Even though the bill was passed last week, the motion as amended by Mr. Ka-piu included a reference to the offsetting mechanism. Myself and the BPA did not agree. And after the Mpf system was introduced, the world faced a cycle of low interest rates, and employees could not enjoy returns to their contributions, and at times they saw a negative growth. Meanwhile, the fund managers enjoyed hefty returns, and that was the source of much criticism. So at the third reading of the amendment bill last week, I proposed to the government that instead of spending $30 billion on abolition of the offsetting arrangement and supporting the business sector, the $30 billion could be used to set up a central provident fund, and it would be well received by all. Many engineers told me that they are civil servants under the new system, and they would not enjoy pension benefits, and that's why they have concerns over their future, and they are not happy with the low investment returns in the Mpf system, and they hope a central provident fund could be set up. The eMPF platform should be commenced soon in order to enhance efficiency of operation and lower administrative costs. They should also learn from other economies in exploring the setting up of a central provident fund on the long run to be managed centrally by the government. This would provide better retirement protections for employees. Mr. Kingsley Wong. Madam Deputy, I thank Dr. Junius HO for proposing this motion that involves the interests of some 3 million employees in Hong Kong. According to the MPFA website, the MPF system was to make personal savings for retirees, and it is an important pillar for Hong Kong's retirement protection system. In Singapore, some of the Provident Fund contributions would pay for medical expenses, and the Central Provident Fund in Singapore has high contribution rates amounting to a total of 37% between employers and employees, while in Hong Kong, employers and employees only make 5% contributions every month, or a total of 10%, and there's a cap. So for those making more than $30,000, employers and employees will make up to 1.5 thousand per month for a total of 3,000 per month. The contribution rates in Hong Kong are very low, so it's not possible to count on the funds for medical expenses. We have the composite consumer price index A, B, and C, and there are funds available for different risk levels. For the capable employees, they can make larger contributions, but the minimum and maximum income levels under the Mpf system were not adjusted for 8 years. In 2018, there was a proposal to adjust the income level to 8,000. The minimum should be adjusted to 8,250 and the maximum $48,000. We hope the SAR government would regularly adjust the mechanism so that the able can contribute more. That way they can achieve high retirement savings. The contribution rates in Hong Kong are very low, and it's very difficult to raise these ratios, but we can adjust the minimum and maximum thresholds every 4 years. So hopefully that could be done by the government. For those making less than $4,100 per month, they do not have to make MPF contributions. The SAR government promised that by 2024 they would make MPF contributions on the behalf of the low income, and at that time about 200,000 employees were expected to benefit, but now we are yet to see any timeline or implementation plan. We hope the new term government can make good on the promise made by the current term government in improving the MPF system. As Dr. Ho suggested in his motion, the MPF assets have been eroded by inflation and returns were lackluster. So by the time employees retire, the real purchasing power of the savings would be negligible. MPF must be linked to inflation. So that is why the FTU proposed a proposal of inflation plus 1%, and the and MPF schemes must be could be made available to ensure that they are at least on a par with inflation. And in terms of the amendment by Mr. Ka-piu, I believe our officials have done a good job in making investments. The exchange fund has a balance of more than $4,000 billion, and the annual return was 3.9%, while inflation was 1.5%. So the real rate of return was 2.5%. So the FTU's proposal is to establish schemes featuring rate of return of inflation plus 1%. I believe our officials from the financial services are capable of getting done. I support the motion. Thank you.
Mr. Michael Lee, thank you, Madam Deputy. I declare that I am a 45-year-old wage earner. In 2000, when I learned that the government was going to set up the MPF, I was really excited. At the time, I thought then I could, rely on my own analysis and choose the right products for myself so I could prepare well for my retirement. But then the fact is, so far, the MPF system has been in place for over 20 years, and I've recently done a quick opinion poll among people close to me, and I find that from most young people, their MPF account is losing money. As for the more senior colleagues, they say they don't even want to mention MPF anymore. Now, since 2000, we see that the net rate of return is just 3.6% for most employees. It doesn't really beat the increase in inflation of 30% over the 20 years. So that's why many people no longer see MPF as a form of retirement protection. They will see it as a bonus. Let's say for someone who's making $30,000 a month, every month the employer and the employee have both to contribute $1,500 to the MPF account, so that the government would think that this employee will have an income of $31,500 month, but in fact, the employees only get an income of $28,500. So the employees don't count the $3,000 of contribution. Why? Because for the MPF system, the biggest criticism is that there are few choices, high administration fee, and low return rate. Now, fund managers charge high administration fees. They use all sorts of excuses to make charges. Administration fees, investment management fee, trustee fees, sponsor fees, and so on. So they keep charging various fees. And that would eventually erode all the MPF benefits. So when people invest $100, they are actually buying something that's worth less than $100. In recent years, yes, there's been some minor reduction in fees, but the fee level is still not acceptable. That's why the government must take up discussion with the trustees. They must not use all sorts of excuses to charge fees, and there has to be a cap even on fees charged. Otherwise, people are saying that the MPF is only enriching the fund managers. They're the one getting rich and not the employees. Now, as for how employees would choose the investment products to form their portfolio, that really leads to another question. If employees go all in, say for U.S. securities funds or Japanese securities funds or other high-risk funds, they may think that they're going to make high earnings in future, but then they have overlooked the risk. And when they retire at 65, it's possible that there are only scraps left in the MPF benefits. Most of the benefits would have been lost in investment, and that's not enough to support them through retirement. The third point I want to make is now we shouldn't just let others benefit from the scheme. So the government should really consider allowing employees to invest in our own infrastructure projects, say railway projects, tunnel projects, even Lantau Tomorrow. Or what about the jockey club? If we don't limit our imagination, we should even allow the employees to invest in GBA infrastructure, Belt and Road initiatives, and say through government-issued bonds and so on. I believe that will help us to substantially enhance the sense of belonging of the public. If GBA infrastructure projects have good yields and members of the public share in the success, then they will learn more about the national development, and they will also be more prepared to spend. They will take the railway and other public transport more, so they to get a higher return. Now, where the MPF has been around for 20 years, it's not really about revitalizing the MPF, but rather it's about a complete overhaul, so that we could improve retirement benefits. And we should take this opportunity to let the public better understand about the development plans of Hong Kong and the country. Thank you. Mr. Paul Chair. For 7 years in a row, I remember Mr. Leung Yu-chung moved motion on the needs of persons with disability, and in 3 years he moved motion on the transport needs of a person with disability. So Dr. Junius HO, you still have a long way to go. You have to work harder. Now, many members have repeated various points, so why do I want to speak now? Perhaps I want to make a few points. President Xi Jinping made a very good analogy. That is, Hong Kong Chinese people should have our own shoes. We know whether the shoes fit us. It's the same for the constitutional system, and it's the same for retirement protection. We always talk about retirement protection pillars around the world. What about the Chinese society? I think filial piety is something we care very much about in the Chinese society, and also in Chinese society, we want to own our homes. So for many in the working population, it's not just the senior management. They would love to own a property as their home and another as rental property. And then for Chinese people, we like to make savings because we've been refugees for too many years, so we have a strong sense of saving up for the future, for the rainy days. So this is not the same in Western society, and also maybe because they have a good retirement protection system. Even if they don't have a good retirement system, they would rather spend the money first and care about and worry about in retirement later. So it's about finding shoes that really fit us. In the past, if someone say the system is good, so we just follow suit. Now, when many mentioned the Singaporean retirement protection system, what about closer to us, Zhuhai? Zhuhai City recently allows people to withdraw their benefits for home patches, for home decoration, and they could even use the money where they work for buying a home in another province where they are from. Well, of course, Chinese people care much about owning properties, but anyway, it's about leverage. If you keep money in a bank, you don't use it, it's not it serves no purpose. You need to give someone best protection at the best time, right time. For example, healthcare. Now, Mr. Tang will say that we will use up the funds if we buy healthcare insurance, but health insurance is about leverage effect. Another leverage effect is about education. That is a right time you should spend money on education is good for you, and even buying landed property. It's important too. It's about leverage effect. So it's about allowing people choices and transparency. And in MPF system, these are the two major deficiencies. I won't want to talk about performance, fees, and so on. But we always we always compare the rate of return with inflation. Really, do we want to compare ourselves with North Korea and Iran about our judicial system or press freedom? If we compare ourselves with the trackers funds, the so-called the laziest funds, our return of rate of return is still lower than that of such funds. And of course, that's not the only comparison. Now, the new government are always emphasis KPIs. I think we need to do things on three fronts with KPI. First, we're talking about system with huge assets, and then we're talking about over $100 billion in fees. Is that is it worth it? And transparency, there's no transparency. We ask for any information, they say they don't keep records. Now I'm running out of time, so I just want the Public Accounts Committee to do a thorough investigation into the cost effectiveness and benefits of the MPF to see whether the system will allow us to achieve the original objective, or are we losing too much money in the system. So as the Oriental Day says that after 21 years of contributing MPF, we end up with nothing. So I think more importantly, we need to have more choices.
議員請各位
If I may remind members, please wear a mask if you speak in the chamber.
議員想
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Dr. Junius HO, you may now speak on the amendments. Madam Deputy. I heard the response from different members. Apparently, most of them were not against the idea of enhancing the MPF system. But as to how it is done, there were different views. My motion seeks to revitalize the MPF, and that includes making the system better and more flexible. The system is very rigid. We should allow scheme members to make their own choices, and my proposal is to allow them to use MPF to pay for certain very important purposes, and some members felt that this would go against the intent of the MPF. So are we trying to safeguard the funds under the MPF system, or are we trying to safeguard the lives of our people, including their living quality and health? Every year, annual, the contributions of the MPF amount to at least $70 billion, and the figure is growing every year. Dr. Ho, please focus on the amendments proposed by other members. Mr. Ka-piu agreed that the system must be enhanced, but he removed the part of a motion that the MPF could be used to take out medical insurance, and this is unacceptable to me. For Mr. Chen Kim-po, he simply clarified some of the background information, and that's why I support his proposal. For Dr. David Lam, his amendment is pragmatic enough, and I would also support his amendment. The crux of my motion is to encourage the government to think about the needs of the people, and this does not go against the intent of the MPF system at all. And that is why I support the motions as amended by Mr. Chen and Dr. Lam, but not Mr. Tang. Thank you.
事務及庫
Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. Madam Deputy, I would like to thank Dr. Junius HO again for moving the motion and the 3 other members for moving the amendments. I also like to thank 23 other members who spoke in the debate. Now, at the start of the debate, I'd explained the policy intent of the MPF system. I also explained the actual performance and various enhancement measures in relation to the MPF. Now, I would like to respond to some of the key main views expressed in the debate. Dr. Junius HO, Dr. David Lam, and many members would like to allow early withdrawal, to allow other reasons for early withdrawal of accrued benefits, such as for paying medical expenses, health care insurance, and even for home purchase. I must stress that the original intention and ultimate objective of the MPF is to help the wage earners to establish a fiscal discipline and require them to make savings for retirement regularly and on a long-term basis. There are also preservation requirements. This is to make sure that their accrued benefits will not be depleted before retirement, or that they could make advance payment of the retirement protection. Now, last week, this council passed the bill to abolish the MPF offsetting arrangement that will offer better protection to the retirement benefits of wage earners. Now we're facing an aging society, so we should focus on discussions to further improve and strengthen MPF functions rather than backtracking to explore various other measures that may undermine or even overturn the MPF as an important cornerstone of our retirement protection system. Now, under the MPF system, employers and employers each make 5% of contribution. If we allow MPF benefits for the payment of health care insurance premium, medical expenses, or even first-time home purchase, and then without affecting retirement protection, one feasible or reasonable arrangement is for setting up dedicated savings account. It will be similar to the health care insurance and housing provident fund accounts under the 5 insurance 1 housing fund system of the mainland, or the healthcare savings scheme account in the central provident system of Singapore, or the general accounts for home purchase, healthcare insurance, investment, and education. But I must point out that the total contribution on the mainland and Singapore is 57%, 37% respectively. I'm sure you agree. If we need to increase the 10% contribution rate substantially to 30% or even 50%, it will be difficult to reach consensus in the community. If we look at the MPF system now, employers and employees both contribute together 10% with a cap of $36,000. So each scheme member has on average about $260,000 of MPF assets. And then in the market, whether it's the general healthcare insurance or voluntary healthcare insurance, the premiums cost a few thousand to several tens of $1,000s each year. Or if we want to buy a home, of course, it costs even much more. So unless both employers and employees accept increasing the MPF contribution rate, otherwise we don't increase MPF contribution and we don't want to affect retirement protection, it will be difficult for us to use MPF assets to meet other needs. Some have complained about a high administration fee and low return of MPF. If we want to assess the cost effectiveness of MPF, we have to look at the fee level and investment performance. I explained in the opening address the investment performance of MPF. Other members also talked about that. So now I will focus on the fee level and investment choices. As I mentioned in the opening address, when MPF trustees and their schemes migrate to the eMPF platform now under preparation, we estimate in the first 2 years of transition, the platform fee is calculated on the basis of 30 to 40 base points, and that means average scheme administration fees will go down by about 30%. The overall fund expense ratio of ER will go down by over 10%. And after 20 years, the platform fees will continue to be reduced to about 20 to 25 base points. That is half of the current administration fees. So the accumulated savings would reach some $30 to $40 billion. We can see, therefore, the eMPF platform is immediately effective in reducing fee levels. Now, we're grateful to the Legislative Council for passing the principal legislation to implement the eMPF system last October. So I'm also grateful to trustees for their support, and so we're able to proceed with the scheme, and we will be able to achieve early reduction of fees. Now, the eMPF platform will also enhance the user's experience. It will facilitate scheme members to manage and switch to other fund schemes, and that will promote market competition. It will also be conducive to the introduction of full portability of MPF as suggested by Mr. Ka-piu. Mr. Chen Kim-po and other members have hoped that the eMPF platform will be launched soon. The project is now in the development stage. Now, building the eMPF platform is a massive project. We are talking about an entirely new operations framework involving 13 trustees, 25 fund schemes, and over 4 million scheme members with over 10 million MPF accounts. So we need to migrate information on this scale, and we must not underestimate the complexity of the exercise. Our aim is that in around April 2023, when we have completed system testing, we could then roll out the platform in stages. This is a very ambitious target. The MPFA will continue to keep in communication with stakeholders and monitor closely the progress of the contractor to ensure that the project will be completed in good time and with good quality. Mr. Ka-piu has suggested lowering the fee levels of default investment strategy funds. In fact, last October, the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Amendment Ordinance 2021 was passed for the so-called lazy funds under DIS funds. The government has already lowered the statutory cap from 0.2% to 0.1% each year. As for the management fees of DIS fund, there's a cap of 0.75%. At the Bills Committee meetings of the 2021 Amendment Ordinance, the administration mentioned that when trustees and their schemes migrate to the eMPF platform, there will be more detailed information to show that because of the eMPF platform, there will be savings in administrative costs. So therefore, the government could review the statutory cap of 0.75% of fees. Now, there are fee controls under the DIS. The DIS also serves as an indicator. It also puts pressure on funds to reduce fees. A percentage of the fees fund expenses have dropped to the new low of 1.39% as at March this year. Now, for the 2021 Amendment Ordinance passed last year, it stated clearly that there will be fee control on administration fees after the implementation of the eMPF platform to make sure that the cost savings will be passed directly to scheme members. There will be two statutory requirements. Firstly, trustees may not charge a scheme administration fee that is higher than the platform fee under the eMPF, so that the cost savings could be passed directly to scheme members. That is the difference between the fees charged by the platform and trustees will be passed to scheme members for their benefit. Secondly, on the FER, if they're saving, then there must be corresponding reduction in overall fee levels. We believe that with the eMPF platform, we'll be able to standardize, streamline, as well as automate the management of the MPF schemes. And then there will be scale of economy with digitization. And then we could make sure there is a continuous trend of a fee reduction. We will closely monitor the fee levels. As Mr. Sarili pointed out, increasing transparency and market competitions is also key to lowering fees. The MPF platform covers 13 trustees with 27 schemes. There are also 412 funds, and so there are various management fees such as administration fees, trustee fees, manager fees, sponsor fees, and investment return fees, and so on. Now, scheme members could have regard to the different fund portfolios and also consider the fund rate, expense ratio, and so on in deciding what funds to buy. Now, Ms. Darley mentioned we need to step up our effort in educating scheme members, so the MPFA will do so. Last year, the 2021 Amendment Ordinance was passed, and at the time, and since then, we've been implementing various enhancement measures as suggested in Mr. Michael Look's amendment. Then, now, for example, the annual benefit statement must be issued every year to scheme members. It should contain information such as the FER, annualized rate of return, accumulated return, recent management fees, so on, to be included in the annual benefit statement. Now, these requirements will time with the full implementation of the eMPF platform. This will help to enhance transparency of MPF funds, and scheme members will be able to easily check their account information and manage their funds properly. Now, a number of members mentioned other investment choices. For example, inflation-linked investment products, the default investment products from the public sector or non-profit-making sector, and so on. The MPF scheme now provides over 400 different fund portfolios with different levels of risk and return to scheme members. Now, some members have pointed out to the difficulties for scheme members to make choices. Since 2017, the legislation requires for each MPF scheme there has to be a global investment portfolio. So with different levels of risk adjusted in accordance with the age of the scheme members. Now, some 2.61 million accounts have chosen this so-called lazy fund. And for two of the funds, since the since 2017, the annualized net rate of return as at March 2022 is 7.2% and 3.2%. So there's been a steady growth, and it certainly beats inflation by a large measure. And then also it will help to divest risks. Disperse risk. Now we will review the DIS and the overall operation of the MPF from time to time. We will make sure that there is a diverse range of products, and also we will relax the various restrictions so that we could achieve the long-term objective for scheme members to accrue benefits over time. Many members have suggested other enhancement measures, for example, retirement protection for the silver-haired working class and working population, and paying MPF for low-income earners and so on. Now, for the silver-haired working population, employees need not make a MPF contribution after the age of 64 or 5, but then both employees and employees are free to make contribution. As for the government paying MPF contributions on behalf of low-income earners, the chief executive has already made an announcement on the measure in January 2020. It will help to strengthen retirement protection for low-income earners. Now, we need to make the various support arrangements first, so this could come into effect when the eMPF platform is launched in 2025, the earliest. Now, for the ceiling and floor of income under the MPF is reviewed from time to time. And this, the Labour and Welfare Bureau will follow up on the matter because it has to do with retirement protection. The Labour and Welfare will carefully consider the reports of the MPF, and they will consider all factors, and then they will report their review findings to the LegCo in a timely manner. Now, for the various enhancement measures mentioned just now, they all involve the overall policy of retirement protection. When the Labour Welfare Welfare Bureau will review such policies, and they will see how the MPF is performing as the second pillar of the retirement protection and how it complements other pillars. Now, at this and the opening address, I said the MPF is like a marathon run for 40 years, because for a retirement protection system, it has to go through some 40 years before we could see its effect of accumulating assets over time. And then at the end of the run, the wage earners were able to benefit from the savings they made over the years. Now, in this marathon run, there will be changes in the international environment, market volatility, and various economic cycles and so on. Also, we've been hit by the COVID pandemics, but we must not lose hope. We must not give up halfway. We must bear in mind the long-term retirement savings function of MPF. At the same time, we'll continue to listen to views of the public and members, and then we'll review the operation of the MPF in a timely manner, and to make sure that it will serve its function as retirement protection. Thank you.
I now call upon Mr. Ka-piu to move an amendment. President, I move my amendment. Mrs. Regina Yip claims a division.
Come on. Okay.
Do you wish to claim a division? No. Mr. Tommy Chan claims a division. The bell will be rung.
係吳永嘉議員。
Mr. Jimmy, I have a declaration to make. I'm a non-executive director of the MPF Authority, and with the wording in the original motion and motion as amended, there could be conflicts of interest, so I would not vote on the item. Mr. Ka-piu, like I said, I am a non-executive director of the MPF Authority, but I do not receive any remuneration or honorarium. It is your decision, and you simply have to declare your interests.
開始表決。
The voting begins. Please check your votes. The voting is closed. The results are shown. From the election committee, 25 present, 5 in favor, 3 against, 7 abstentions. From the FCs and GCs, 43 present, 10 in favor, 15 against, 16 abstentions. The question is not agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment negatived. Ms. Tari Lee. President, I move that in the event of further divisions being claimed in respect of the motion on revitalizing the Mandatory Provident Fund, the division shall proceed after the bell has been rung for 1 minute. I now propose the question to you that the motion moved by Ms. Starry Lee be passed. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. The question is agreed by majority of each of the two groups of members present. I now propose that in the event of further divisions, the voting shall proceed after the bell has been rung for 1 minute. Mr. Chen Kin-po, you may move your amendment. President, I move my amendment. I propose the question to you that Mr. Chen Kin-po's motion or amendment be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Mr. Tommy Chan claims a division. The bell will be rung for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. Voting is closed. The results are shown. From the election committee, 25 present, 9 in favor, 5 against, 11 abstentions. From the GCs and FCs, 43 present, 11 for, 9 against, 21 abstentions. The question is not agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment negatived. Dr. David Lam, you may move your amendment. President, I move my amendment. I propose the question to you that Dr. David Lam's amendment be passed. Mr. Tommy Chan claims the division. The bell will be rung for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. Voting is closed. The results are shown. From the election committee, 25 present, 8 in favor, 5 against, 12 abstentions. From the FCs and GCs, 43 present, 11 in favor, 12 against, 18 abstentions. The question is not agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment negatived. Dr. Junius HO, you still have 1 minute and 57 seconds to reply. Then the debate will come to a close. Dr. Junius HO. President, I'd like to thank the members for supporting my motion. A large number of them agree that there's room for improving the MPF system and to enhance and introduce more flexibility to the fund. Deep down, I realize that for members who are not supportive, if my motion is passed, that means MPF could be used to take out medical insurance, and that would go against the intent of the MPF system. But I'd like to stress that we are simply giving people options, and this is just a recommendation to the government. If we cannot even fulfill this step, how can we do better? Let's say we have a proposal and we run into headwind, so I am not very happy about it. But for those who cast abstentions, so please do side with us, and together we can revitalize the MPF for the benefit of the people. Of the 5 retirement protection pillars, putting some funds aside for healthcare purposes would be for the benefit of everyone. I now put a question to you that Dr. Junius HO's motion Dr. Junius HO's motion be passed. Mr. Tommy Chan claims the division. The bell will be rung for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. Voting is closed. The results are shown. From the Election Committee, 25 present, 8 in favor, 5 against, 12 abstentions. From the FCs and GCs, 43 present, 10 in favor, 13 against, 18 abstentions. The question is not agreed by a majority of each of the 2 groups of members present. I declare the motion negative.
Honorable Jeffrey Lam will move a motion